Hey guys, we're going to get back in our textbook today for a couple little lessons, a couple little pages rather. So not a long lesson today. We're going to look at page 148 through page 150. So go ahead and open up your textbook with me to page 148. This is kind of the end of the lesson we started on Monday. We've been talking all week about the abolitionists, the Underground Railroad. And so we're going to talk now today, kind of focuses on the big differences between the North and the South. We call that sectional, like a section of a stadium. You might sit in the section of the stadium behind the end zone, or you might sit on the section beside the 50-yard line. Sectionalism, that means a section of the United States is the North, a section is the South. And so there's sectional differences in the North and the South. So let's read pages 148 through 150, talk about this as we get through the lesson today. Slavery marked a major difference between life in the North and life in the South. Remember, slavery not in the North, slavery all over the South. Many begin to believe in sectionalism. Sectionalism is the belief that the needs of one's own region are more important than the needs of the nation. The people in the North and the South had different ideas about the economy, how we should make our money, government, and society. So the North, hey, let's make our money in the factories. Let's make clothing in these textile mills. In the South, we got to have our slaves to grow all these crops so we can ship cotton and other products around the world. So there's this belief, different beliefs in how money should be made between the North and the South. And it's agriculture. When you see the word agriculture, think farming, versus industry, think factories. So farming versus factories, agriculture versus industry. In the North, many people worked in industry and shipping. There were many large mills and factories. Some people owned small farms, but most people worked in business. Factories in the North needed more workers. So many immigrants came to the North to find work. The South used slave labor and did not have jobs for immigrants. Over time, the population of the North grew much larger than that of the South. To ship all their goods to markets, the North needed good transportation. Railroads and steamships made shipping products faster and easier. In the South, farming was the most important part of the economy. Cotton, tobacco, and rice were the main crops. Powerful people owned large plantations. They depended on enslaved people to do the hard work. Southern farmers used roads and rivers to ship their crops. How do you ship a crop on a river? Well, by boat, of course, steamship. They did not rely on railroads or steamships to transport their crops to market. So why were the South not using the railroads and steamships? They were using the roads and rivers. The economic differences affected how people in the North and South viewed government. These differences were most noticeable when it came to the issue of slavery and states' rights. So look at this picture here. It kind of shows the country divided. You've got the North. What do you see here? You see all these factories. You see railroads. That's the North. And what do you see here in the picture of the South? Big houses, big fields, big farms. So that's how it was. The South had a lot of big farms. The North had a lot of big factories and big cities. A lot more people living in the North. They moved north to work in the big cities. The South, a lot of slaves. So let's talk about slavery and states' rights. Many Southern leaders believed strongly in states' rights. They thought that it should be up to people in each state to decide if they wanted slavery. They said the Constitution gave states the right to make decisions for themselves. If states did not like what the U.S. Congress was doing, they could leave or secede. Now, that's a big, important word. This is the first time we've heard this word. Some states, including South Carolina, began to think about seceding from the Union if the government tried to abolish slavery. Let's not miss that word there, secede. That means leave the United States. That doesn't mean go to another country. That means your state. If your state secedes, it means it's saying, this state is no longer part of the United States. So we're not united anymore. So South Carolina started thinking, well, if the government makes rules that we can't have slaves, then we just won't be part of the United States anymore. We're going to secede. And so these states in the South began thinking like that. Well, we just won't be part of the United States. If we don't like what the government's doing, we'll just break away. We'll just secede from the government and we'll create our own, we'll just be our own country. So that's the first time we've heard that thought. That's going to come into play big time in the next chapter. Let's read about black life in the North. We talked about slaves in the South, but there were black people living in the North too. By the early 1800s, northern states did not allow slavery. Because all African Americans in the North were either free or lived as free people, black people were allowed a different place in society than in the South. Still, African Americans in the North were rarely considered equal to white Americans. African Americans in the North could own property and their own businesses, send their children to black schools, and learn to read and write. This different society in the North created a culture that was, at least in some ways, more accepting for people with dark skin. Unfortunately, those differences were only on the surface. Many white Northerners supported black children getting an education, but did not want their children to go to school with them. A black person might be able to own a business, but many white people would not shop there. Black people could only live in certain neighborhoods and in general could only get mental or low-paying and unpleasant jobs. Sorry, I said mental. Get menial, which means low-paying and unpleasant jobs at most businesses. So even though they weren't slaves in the North, they still weren't treated exactly right, were they? There was still a lot of segregation. They were still separate part of society. And that takes a while, we'll find out. And you'll find out in fifth grade even more. It takes a while to make everybody to be more accepting of people with different color skin. All right, page 50, slavery in the new territories. This becomes a big issue too. All this land we got, remember the Louisiana Purchase, all that land still becoming states. The Mexican War, all this land we got from Mexico. Now people are moving there. It's becoming states. Are these new states going to become states where slavery is allowed? Or are they going to become states where slavery is not allowed? Obviously, the South says, let them have slaves. The North says no. So let's talk about this. As the country grew, new states were added. This often led to debates over slavery in Congress. Lawmakers worked to keep a balance of power between free and slave states. The Constitution allowed Southern states to count a portion of their slave population to decide the number of lawmakers they could send to Congress. The 3/5 compromise. Remember, 3 out of every 5 slaves could be counted in the population. By allowing slavery to spread to new states, this would increase the power of slave states in Congress. Yes, yet Southern states feared that the new states might become free states. If that happened, free states in Congress might have the power to abolish slavery. So let's think about that. In Congress, you've got these people. Let's just use the Senate. It's a very easy example. So for the Senate, every state gets to send 2 senators that represent your state. So let's say then there were 20 states. There were more than that, but let's say there were 20. And there were 10 slave states, or states that allowed slavery in the South, and there were 10 free states, states that did not allow slavery in the North. Of course, those 2 senators from every slave state are going to vote to keep slavery. And those 2 senators from every free state in the North are going to vote to end slavery. But as long as you keep it equal, there's not an unbalance of power. One doesn't overpower the other. So as we add new states to the United States, and those new states then get to send 2 senators to Washington to help make laws for our country, the Southern states worried that if it was a new state that was a free state, then the free states would have more votes in Congress, more power in Congress than the slave states, and vice versa. If the new states were added were slave states, then the slave states would have more power to make laws in Washington than the free states. You following me? It's kind of confusing. But they wanted to keep it equal, an equal number of free states and an equal number of slave states. So Congress avoided bloodshed through compromises such as the Missouri Compromise. We've read a little bit about this. You may not remember it. This agreement allowed Missouri to enter the Union or become part of the United States in 1820 as a slave state. But now there's more slave states than free states. So what are we going to do? To get Northerners to support the compromise, they would add another free state too, Maine. The agreement also set a boundary line along the southern border of Missouri. All states above the line, except for Missouri, would be free from slavery. All states south of the line were open to slavery. The Missouri Compromise quieted things down a bit, but it was only a matter of time before the issue of slavery would divide the nation again. So if you can imagine this red line right here on page 150 in your book, that Missouri Compromise line, any state that was added below it could have slaves. Any states that was added above it could not have slaves. That was the Missouri Compromise. So we're seeing lots of things happening, these big differences in how the North is making their money in factories, the South was making their money in agriculture, farming, and the plantations. We've got these big differences in what they think about slavery. They think slavery is wrong. We've got in the North, in the South, they think slavery is something they've got to have. So you see these different sections, the North and the South, believing different things, wanting different things, and it's going to become a big problem as we move toward the Civil War. All right, got a little video for you to watch on the next slide. No assignment to turn in today. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.